The body was found before nightfall, but the town didn't truly notice until the fog made escape impossible. If you want the truth before the streets swallow it, hit like and subscribe. By late afternoon, a dense November fog had poured into Hallowford, blurring storefronts, muting footsteps, turning familiar streets into corridors of uncertainty. The river town usually thrived on routine, shop bells, delivery wagons, idle chatter, but that day, everything moved slower, as if the air itself was waiting. Detective Samuel Crowe arrived with no intention of working. He stepped down from the cab outside the Hallowford precinct, brushing damp mist from his coat, already regretting the cold. The visit was meant to be simple. One night, dinner with Police Chief Martin Hale, an old academy friend. No cases, no reports, just distance from New York's endless paper trails. That illusion lasted less than 3 minutes. Crowe had barely removed his gloves when the station door flew open. A patrol officer rushed in, breathless, cheeks red from cold and panic. "Chief, we've got a situation near the old grain exchange." Hale straightened at once. "What kind of situation?" "A body, found by a churchgoer heading home." Crowe looked up. "Who?" The officer hesitated. "Charles Whittaker, from Whittaker Trust." Hale exhaled through his nose. "Of course it is." Whittaker had run the town's most influential private bank for nearly 2 decades. Respectable, untouchable, the sort of man people assumed would die quietly in his bed. Crowe offered a thin smile. "Seems Hallowford doesn't care about my plans." Minutes later, lantern light cut weak tunnels through the fog as they walked. Every sound felt amplified: boots on stone, a distant clock chime, the faint creak of unseen doors. The grain exchange loomed ahead, its broad steps barely visible. The woman who found him stood under a gas lamp, hands shaking, 2 officers nearby. "There," one said. Whittaker lay halfway down the steps, early 50s, well-dressed, overcoat buttoned neatly. One arm tucked beneath him, the other stretched forward as if he had tried to steady himself and failed. A collapse, that's what it was meant to look like. Crowe crouched. No one moved him. "No, sir." Something didn't fit. No scuff marks. No sign of a fall. His hat rested beside him instead of tumbling away. Even in death, Whittaker looked arranged. Crowe leaned closer and smelled it. Bitter, sharp, almost sweet. He straightened slowly. "Do you notice that?" Hale sniffed. "Almonds?" "Yes, the wrong kind." Hale's jaw tightened. Crowe continued. Whittaker's lips carried a faint blue tinge. Only one glove remained on his hand, the left was missing. That absence felt intentional. The woman swallowed. "Before I saw him, I heard voices, a man speaking sharply, then nothing." The fog thickened around them, swallowing the street. "This wasn't an accident," Crowe said quietly. "Someone wanted him found, right here." Hale stared at the body. "In weather like this, anyone could vanish." Crowe rose, eyes scanning the empty street. "Which means whoever did this walked away calmly." He adjusted his coat. "Secure his office. Notify the family." As they turned back toward the station, Crowe glanced once more at the still figure on the stone steps. November had arrived in Hallowford, and it had brought something with it. Morning crept into Hallowford without confidence. The fog thinned but refused to leave, clinging to rooftops and chimneys like a rumor that wouldn't die. Word of Charles Whittaker's death had spread before sunrise. Doors opened quieter. Voices dropped mid-sentence. The town moved as if it were being watched. Detective Samuel Crowe left his rented room shortly after 7. Chief Hale had arranged for an escort, but Crowe waved the constable away. Today required observation, not ceremony. The bank came first. When a financier dies suddenly, Crowe believed, the truth rarely hid in the autopsy. It hid in paper. Whittaker Trust occupied the corner of Main and Alder brick facade, brass handles polished daily, windows scrubbed to reflect respectability. Inside, the air smelled of ink and floor polish. A young man stood behind the counter, pale, posture rigid. "Evan Pierce," Crowe said, not asking. The clerk nodded. 25 maybe, clean collar, nervous hands. "I'll speak with you shortly," Crowe said. "First, Mrs. Whittaker." She waited in the private office. Margaret Whittaker rose as he entered, early 40s, slim, dressed in black that looked assembled too quickly to be habitual. "I'm sorry for your loss," Crow said. "So they tell me," she replied softly. Her composure was careful, not brittle, but controlled. Crow noted the tension in her shoulders. "Your husband left the house yesterday evening. Around what time?" "Just after 6. Did he say where he was going?" "To walk. He said the air might help him think." "And was he troubled?" A pause, fractional, measured. "He had concerns, business ones." "Financial?" Her eyes sharpened. "Charles didn't share figures with me." "But he changed," Crow said. "Recently." Another pause, longer. "Yes," Crow pressed gently. "Any letters, anonymous ones?" "No." The word landed too precisely. Crow let it sit. "You stayed home all evening?" "Yes, the maid can confirm it." As he stood, she spoke again. "Detective, was it sudden?" "What have you heard?" "That it wasn't natural." Crow studied her face. "There are unanswered questions." Fear flickered, not grief. Anticipation. Outside, Evan Pierce waited, twisting a pen until his knuckles whitened. "You argued with Whittaker yesterday," Crow said once the door closed. Pierce flushed. "Who said that?" "You did," Crow replied calmly. "It was about discrepancies," Pierce said quickly. "Missing funds. I thought it was an error. He didn't." "And you?" "I wasn't responsible. But someone was." Silence. "Where were you between 6 and 7? "At my boarding house. Mrs. Nolan can confirm it." Crow nodded. "For now." By noon, Crow stood in Dr. Nathan Keller's surgery near the church. The physician was precise, defensive, claimed heart failure, mentioned palpitations, avoided the word poison with professional stubbornness. Last came Eleanor Blackwood. Her house overlooked the river, old money, old confidence. She received them seated, hands folded, expression unreadable. "Whittaker's death is inconvenient," she said flatly. "He managed several of my accounts." "Others might call him a friend," Hale muttered. "Utility outlasts friendship," Blackwood replied. Crow watched her carefully. She had met Whittaker 2 nights before his death, in the fog, near the grain exchange. As they left, Hale exhaled. 4 people, 4 stories. "And one of them is lying," Crow said. He looked back toward the river where fog coiled like smoke. "Possibly more than one." By mid-afternoon, the fog finally loosened its grip, thinning into a dull haze that let the town breathe again, cautiously. Detective Samuel Crow returned to Whittaker Trust alone. He had no interest in nervous company. Evan Pierce unlocked the private office with reluctant care. "Everything's as Mr. Whittaker left it," he said quickly. Crow doubted that. He waited until the clerk left, then closed the door. The room was orderly on the surface. Too orderly. Ledgers aligned, papers stacked. But subtle disturbances betrayed recent tension: a chair angled wrong, a drawer not fully closed, a blotter shifted just enough to catch the eye. Crow worked methodically. Top drawer, stationery, check stubs. Second drawer, correspondence, receipts. Bottom drawer, locked. He scanned the coat rack. Whittaker's overcoat still hung there. Crow reached into the pocket and found a small brass key. The drawer opened easily. Inside lay a thin, hand-stitched ledger, nothing like the official volumes lining the shelves. Its pages were uneven, worn from frequent use. Crow opened it. Initials, dates without context, transfers that didn't exist in the bank's records. Large sums moved quietly, repeatedly. And then a familiar pair of letters. E.B. Eleanor Blackwood appeared 4 times. Always tied to payments. Not investments, not profits, settlements. The final entry stopped Crow cold. "E.B. tonight." Crow closed the ledger slowly. As he leaned back, something else caught his attention. The blotter. He angled it toward the window. Indentations emerged, the ghost of a message written and removed. Letter. Whittaker had written one recently. It was gone. Crow searched again. Nothing. Then he noticed the bookshelf. One volume sat slightly forward. He pulled it. Behind it, a folded scrap of paper. Only one sentence remained intact. "Your secrets will not survive November." Crow slipped it into his notebook. The window latch was unhooked. Outside, moisture marked the sill. Someone had been here after Whittaker's death. In the corridor, Chief Hale waited. Find anything. Too much, Crow said quietly. Whitaker kept a private ledger. Blackmail, most likely. Blackwood is deeply involved. Hale swore under his breath. And someone came back for something, Crow continued. They knew exactly where to look. Their next stop was the post office. Miss Clara Dawes, the postmistress, adjusted her spectacles. Anonymous letters, yes, several lately, thin paper, no return address. Any for Whitaker, Crow asked. She hesitated. 2, maybe 3. Soot smudges, Crow pressed. Yes, as if handled by someone working with coal or machinery. When Crow stepped back onto the street, he felt it awareness. He turned. A man stood across the road, tall, thin, coat collar raised, hat low. Their eyes met. The man turned and vanished into the haze. Crow followed through side streets and alley, then nothing. Empty yard, silence. Hale caught up, breathing hard. Whoever that was, he didn't want to be seen. No, Crow said. He wanted to see me. The fog began to roll back in, and someone in Hallowford had just realized the ledger was no longer hidden. By the following evening, the fog returned with intent, not drifting, advancing. Lamps along Hallowford's narrow streets flickered awake, each halo swallowed almost instantly. The town felt compressed, as if the night had leaned closer to listen. Detective Samuel Crow tightened his coat and checked his watch. Same hour, he said. Same conditions. Chief Martin Hale grimaced. You really believe reenacting it will help? I believe the dead leave footprints, Crow replied, even when the fog tries to erase them. They started at Whitaker House, a solid brick residence overlooking the river bend. Inside, the air smelled faintly of polish and coal ash. The maid, Ruth Calder, waited nervously in the hall, twisting her apron. He left a little after 6, she said again. Had his scarf and his cane. Crow paused. Always the cane? Yes, sir. Never without it since his fall last winter. Did any letters arrive that day? Crow asked. Ruth hesitated, eyes flicking toward the staircase. 1. He took it straight to the study. I heard him curse. Later, he burned something in the grate. Crow examined the fireplace. Though recently cleaned, charred flecks clung to the edge. Cream paper, thick stock. Another warning destroyed before it could be answered. They stepped back into the street. From here, Crow said, to the grain exchange. No shortcuts. The fog closed around them as they walked. Houses faded into silhouettes. Footsteps echoed without owners. Crow imagined Charles Whitaker ahead, coat collar raised, cane tapping, thoughts accelerating with every step. At Cedar Square, where the road split, Crow slowed. One path is brighter, he murmured. The other quieter. When you're worried, Hale said, you choose the visible one. They continued toward the exchange. A small figure emerged from the mist, a schoolgirl clutching a satchel, cheeks red with cold. You're the detective, she said. Crow nodded. You saw something, she swallowed. 2 men, arguing. One was tall, thin, long coat. The other was heavier. He had a cane. I saw it catch the lamplight. What happened next? Crow asked. The tall one stepped back. It was like he vanished. Then the other man grabbed his chest and sat down. Crow thanked her and watched her hurry away. They climbed the stone steps. Crow stood where the tall man had stood, half hidden in shadow. From here one could watch the street, the bank, the road from Whitaker's house and leave unseen. Something's wrong, Crow said suddenly. Hale frowned. What? The cane. It hadn't been with the body. No constable had logged it. Then someone returned, Crow said. After the alarm, they searched. Nearly an hour later, a shout came from behind the exchange. The cane lay shoved into a pile of crates. Crow lifted it. Walnut, silver knob, heavy. He twisted the top. It came free. Inside was a folded slip of paper. 3 names, Evan Pierce, Nathan Keller, Eleanor Blackwood. A 4th name had been scratched out violently, tearing the paper. Hale exhaled. Someone erased themselves. Or was erased, Crow said. He folded the paper away. Whoever feared that name was still afraid. And fear, Crow knew, made people dangerous. The message reached Detective Samuel Crow shortly after noon. Not official, not written. It arrived as urgency. A patrol officer met him halfway down Main Street, breath uneven, voice low. It's Evan Pierce, found on Mill Road. Nearly killed. Crow didn't ask how. He already knew it wouldn't be clean. Pierce lay at Mrs. Nolan's boarding house, seated at the kitchen table like a man unsure whether the world had decided to keep him. His coat was torn, one sleeve soaked dark, a shallow gash cut across his brow, clotted but angry. A mug of tea trembled untouched beneath his hands. He stepped into the road, Mrs. Nolan said quickly, right in front of a freight truck. If the driver hadn't slammed the brakes. He didn't step, Pierce whispered. He was pushed. Crow took the chair opposite him, calm, still, letting the room settle. Tell me, he said. Pierce swallowed. I went out for bread. Fog wasn't thick yet. I heard footsteps behind me, fast, controlled. His fingers tightened. A hand hit my shoulder, hard. I slipped, hit my head. The road came up too fast. Did you see him? Yes, Pierce closed his eyes. Tall, thin, long coat, the same shape, again. This wasn't random, Crow said quietly. Someone wanted you dead, Pierce nodded once. Because I know things, Crow leaned forward. Then start talking. The words came in fragments at first, then faster. Whitaker was blackmailing people, quietly, carefully. He kept records off the books, not just figures. Leverage, Pierce's voice cracked. I saw enough to understand what he was doing, payments, silence, protection. How many, Crow asked. 4 that I know of. Blackwood. Yes, Keller. Me, Pierce hesitated. And someone else, Crow waited. He moved money through accounts tied to his wife. If it ever surfaced, she'd take the fall. He told me once that everyone needed an exit plan. Crow's jaw tightened. And the ledger, he asked. He never planned to stop, Pierce said. Last week he told me one payment was marked final. He was furious, said you don't walk away from debts like that. Blackwood, Crow said. Pierce nodded. Silence settled. You wrote the letters, Crow said. Pierce flinched. I wanted him scared. I wanted him to stop. I never thought, his voice broke. I never thought he'd be murdered. Crow stood. You're alive because someone was interrupted, he said. That won't happen twice. Outside, fog gathered again, thickening by the minute. Chief Hale joined him on the steps. 2 attempts, he muttered. 1 dead. 1 nearly. Escalation, Crow said. The erased name is panicking. They returned to Blackwood House as dusk fell. Eleanor Blackwood received them with her usual composure, seated, hands folded, eyes alert. Another visit, she said. How industrious. Someone tried to kill Evan Pierce, Crow said. Her expression barely shifted. Interest flickered, that was all. How unfortunate. He was pushed into traffic, Crow added. By the same man seen near the grain exchange. Speculation, Blackwood replied smoothly. Perhaps, Crow said, but someone is cleaning loose ends. Blackwood's gaze sharpened. Then you should look for the one Whitaker tried to destroy. As they left, Crow felt it again, pressure. The sense of being observed. Somewhere in Hallowford someone had failed once. They wouldn't fail again. Night sealed Hallowford tight, not with silence, with tension. Fog pressed against windows, pooled in alleys, crept under doors. Detective Samuel Crow stood in the assembly hall, watching constables guide chairs into a rough circle. He had asked for discretion. He got curiosity instead. All the pieces were finally in the same room. Margaret Whitaker arrived first, pale, composed by habit rather than strength. She chose a chair near the wall, hands folded, eyes fixed on nothing. Evan Pierce followed, bandaged, shaken, very aware of how close he had come to dying. Dr. Nathan Keller entered stiffly, coat buttoned too high, jaw set as if preparing for accusation. Last came Eleanor Blackwood, unhurried, cane tapping softly, confidence worn like armor. Crow closed the door himself. "Thank you for coming," he said. "This will not take long if no one lies." No one spoke. Charles Whitaker, Crow continued, was murdered, not robbed, not attacked in passion, poisoned quietly, deliberately. He paused. And afterward someone attempted a second killing. Pierce shifted. Keller's eyes flicked toward the door. Blackwood remained still. Whitaker kept a private ledger, Crow said. It recorded payments, threats, leverage, 4 names. He placed a folded slip of paper on the table. 3 remained. 1 was violently erased. Margaret Whitaker looked up sharply. Crow turned to Keller. "Doctor, you claimed heart failure. Convenient. You knew the symptoms could mask poison, Keller bristled. I examined him outdoors, in fog. I made a judgment, and prescribed nothing that night, Crow said. You had motive but not opportunity. Multiple witnesses place you elsewhere. Keller exhaled stiffly. Relief, not innocence. Crow shifted to Pierce. You wrote the letters. Anonymous, threatening. Pierce nodded miserably. To scare him, I wanted him to confess. And that nearly got you killed, Crow said. Then he faced Margaret. You said your husband had changed, Crow said quietly. Secretive. Withdrawn, she swallowed. He barely spoke to me. Because he planned to sacrifice you, Crow said. The words landed hard. What? Her voice cracked. Funds were diverted into accounts tied to your name, Crow continued. If the ledger surfaced, you would have been blamed, ruined, possibly imprisoned. Margaret's breath hitched. I didn't know. I believe you, Crow said. Alina Blackwood finally moved. That explains the erased name, she said coolly. Crow turned to her. You knew it, he said, the moment you saw the list. Blackwood met his gaze. Whitaker told me years ago, if things turned against him, he'd take someone down with him. And when you realized it was his wife, Crow said, you confronted him. In the fog, Blackwood replied evenly. You argued near the grain exchange, Crow continued. Witnesses saw it. He threatened exposure, yours, hers. Silence stretched. You brought poison, Crow said, prepared. Meant for leverage, but used when he wouldn't yield. Blackwood smiled faintly. A desperate man forces decisions. And after, Crow added, you returned, took the cane, removed the list, missed Pierce. Her smile faded. Crow stepped closer. You weren't erasing guilt, he said. You were erasing competition. The fog pressed harder against the windows. Blackwood's grip tightened on her cane. And now, Crow said softly, you're out of places to hide. For a long moment, no one moved. The fog outside pressed against the tall windows of the assembly hall, dull and restless, as if it already knew the ending and was waiting for permission to leave. Alina Blackwood stood slowly. Her cane touched the floor once, deliberate, controlled. You've constructed a convincing narrative, Detective Crow, she said, but narratives are not verdicts. Crow didn't raise his voice. He didn't need to. No, he said, evidence is. He nodded toward the constable near the door. The man stepped forward and placed a small object on the table, a black leather glove, stiff at the fingers, darkened at the cuff. It was recovered behind the grain exchange, Crow continued, where the fog is thickest, where someone hurried away. Blackwood glanced at it for half a second too long. You dropped it, Crow said, the night Whitaker died. A glove proves proximity, she replied coolly, not murder. Then let's talk about poison, Crow said, turning slightly. Bitter almond residue was detected on Whitaker's scarf. Not enough to linger strongly enough to be dismissed. Unless someone knew it would, Dr. Keller stiffened. You hoped heart failure would be accepted, Crow said to him, and it almost was. Blackwood's composure began to fracture, not into panic but calculation. You confronted Whitaker, Crow went on. Not to kill him, to force silence. But when he revealed his final leverage, his plan to destroy his own wife, you realized you weren't dealing with a man who would stop. Margaret Whitaker's face had drained of color. She stared at Blackwood, understanding arriving late and violently. You poisoned him, Crow said. Quick, clean, then stage the collapse. And the cane? Blackwood asked quietly. You came back for it, Crow replied. You knew what it contained. You removed the list but not before leaving a trace, and when Pierce survived, you panicked. Blackwood closed her eyes briefly. So, she said, the town keeps its conscience. No, Crow replied. It loses its fog. She opened her eyes again. This time there was no armor left. I protected myself, she said. Whitaker chose his fate the moment he decided to burn everything around him. Crow nodded once. That's usually what killers believe. The constable stepped forward. Blackwood didn't resist as the cuffs closed around her wrists. Her cane clattered to the floor, hollow now, meaningless. As she was led away, the fog outside began to thin. Street lamps sharpened. Edges returned. Margaret Whitaker exhaled shakily, still standing. Pierce sat unmoving, alive by inches. Keller stared at the table, already rewriting his own version of events. Crow stepped outside. Cold air met him cleaner somehow. November remained, but its grip had loosened. Somewhere down the street, a shop door opened. Life resumed, slowly. Another truth dragged into the open. Another quiet war ended. Crow turned his collar up and walked into the clearing night. And if you stayed until the truth came out, drop a like, subscribe, and tell me this. Was Blackwood driven by greed, or did Whitaker force her hand long before the fog rolled in?